Alright guys, hi there. We're going to be a little bit exciting today, and I'm going to attempt to go through these solutions and actually explain why they are the one they are, especially for the multiple choice answers. And we're going to see if we can actually make it as like a little video, which will be very exciting if it works. Alrighty, so we're going to start with obviously question 1. And we've got a structural adaptation of mammals to minimise heat loss. Okay, now the key words there are minimising heat loss. And we're in cold climates, so we want to think of things that are going to keep the heat in. Okay, it also has to be a structural adaptation. So obviously for this one, the answer is going to be more body hair. Okay, that is a structural adaptation. It is something that that animal has, and it will minimise heat loss. Okay, increased metabolism. Yes, that is something that we would expect to see in animals that live in cold climates, but it is not a structural adaptation. That is something that the body does here, and so that is physiological. Less body fat, so B, that is something that would actually maximise heat loss. So that's something that we'd see in animals that live in warmer climates. And a lower rate of cellular respiration. Well, cellular respiration actually produces heat, so we'd want actually to maximise that rate in an animal that lives in a cold climate, which means that the correct answer is D. Okay, moving on. Hopefully you all got that the diagram below is of a nephron, and the nephron or the nephron is in the kidney. Okay. We're going to look at the nephrons regulates the various components in the blood, such as nitrogenous wastes, glucose and water. And like I've written here, nitrogenous wastes, that's the urea. Now we've talked about that a little bit before. Do not worry too much if you don't understand what that is yet, because that will come up in Unit 1. Okay. Now, basically, for the answers here, I think we can cross out positive feedback, and we can cross out tolerance limits. And then it comes down to between these two. Okay, now, because we're actually asked the regulation is called, okay, negative feedback is the process by which it is regulated. So negative feedback is actually the process, okay, it is not the term itself. So the term itself has got to be homeostasis. Okay, question 4, the hormone responsible for water regulation is ADH. Hopefully you all got that, no worries. And going down to question 5, when the nervous and endocrine systems are compared, the nervous system, it could be, does not rely on chemical messengers. Well, that's true, except for the fact that we have chemicals in the synapse. That's meant to be an M there, I'm not entirely sure that's worked out. So, in the synapse. So because you've got chemicals in the synapse, then it's not a completely correct answer. Requires the circulatory system to carry messages? No. So we can cross that one out straight away because that's in the endocrine system. Is a faster form of communication? Yes. And has prolonged responses? Again, no, that's the endocrine system. So our answer here has to be C. Okay, moving down. We then have hibernation, and a lot of you put that this was a behavioural adaptation. Okay, remember behaviour is something that an animal chooses to do. Okay, now we could decide to go and have a nap, but we couldn't decide to go and fall asleep for a season. Our body wouldn't allow us to do it. And so it has to be a physiological adaptation, because the body is actually physically able to make those changes to allow hibernation. Okay, moving on. We've got a synapse. It tells you that we've got a synapse here. The junction between a neuron and a muscle cell. So we're looking at region X, and region X, if you remember, is called the synaptic cleft. So that is the region between two nerve cells. Okay, we've got the presynaptic neuron here, and we've got the postsynaptic neuron on the other side. Okay, so what happens is that the impulse comes down the synapse, and if you remember, when the impulse comes down the synapse, it causes these vesicles to move to the presynaptic membrane. Okay, and the vesicles contain the neurotransmitter, which is this guy here. Okay, and that neurotransmitter diffuses across the synaptic cleft. So the neurotransmitter is actually a chemical and it moves across this cleft. Okay, so if we look at the question, so the diagram above is of a synapse, the junction between a neuron and a muscle cell. In region X, the action potential jumps across the gap. Okay, well no, that's not the case, because that's not going to work. Sodium ions carry the electrical charge. Again, no. Sodium ions are only active in the actual membrane, in the actual neuron itself. That's how the signal is transmitted. Chemicals enter region X by endocytosis. Okay, endocytosis, if I had a membrane like this, endocytosis is when I've got all my chemicals on the outside and they move into the membrane, and that eventually pinches off to form a vesicle with the neurotransmitter inside it, or with the chemical inside it. That is again not what's going on here. So it has to be D. Our neurotransmitter is diffusing. Okay, moving down. A physiological adaptation of the euro to survive in this hot environment. Okay, so I'm assuming you've read that information up here. Let's go back and read it now, actually. The euro is a small wallaby living in desert regions of the, some desert in Western Australia, but Australia's very big, it's got lots of deserts. They shelter in rocky outcrops during the day. These wallabies are able to survive on limited water, as they can lose 12% of their body water without being adversely affected. They are unable to sweat, however can pant 300 times per minute. They also lick their relatively hairless forelimbs when hot. Okay, so that's given us information about all the different adaptations that they've got. What we've now got to do is decide whether those adaptations are physiological or structural. So question 8, we start with a physiological adaptation. So remember, physiological is something that the body can do. Okay, so relatively hairless forearms, that is not a physiological adaptation. Okay, that would be a structural adaptation if it was going to be asking us that, because it means that we do not trap a layer of air, so it reduces the insulation. Okay, so it's not that one. An inability to sweat. Again, is that something that the body can do? Well, yes, it is. It's something the body, an inability as in something the body can't do. And that could be the answer. However, that would not actually, an inability to sweat, yes, it is a physiological, but it doesn't actually answer the question. Okay, it doesn't actually help them to survive in the hot environment. Because sweat is very important in a hot environment, because it will allow the animal to lose excess heat through evaporation. Okay, so your next one is its ability to survive after losing body water. Okay, again, that is something that the body can do, so that could be our answer. And its ability to pant at a high rate. Well, yes, but that's more to do with their water. Ish. Okay, so it's actually C for that one. A structural adaptation of the euro to conserve water is, again, its lack of sweat glands. Okay. Alrighty. We've got a simple nerve pathway here, and this one was quite poorly done. Alright, so remember, whenever you get a nerve pathway like this, always just start off thinking, well, what everything is. Okay, so some random smiles can make everything right. Okay, stimulus, receptor, sensory neuron, central nervous system, motor neuron, effector, response. Okay, remember that in order to get your pattern right. Okay, so this, our stimulus, remember, is the thing that comes in to hit it. So the stimulus might be a pin. That's clearly a drawing pin. Or it might be the pain of touching hot water or something like that. The thing that detects the change here is our receptor. Okay, so that's our receptor, which means that this must be the sensory neuron going to the central nervous system, going to the motor neuron, and then this is the effector, and so the response would be to pull the arm away. Okay, so the receptor in this case is here, so that is labelled P. Moving down, a motor neuron. So the motor neuron, remember, goes from the central nervous system, so from here, the central nervous system, to the effector, which is here. So this one here must be the motor neuron. So that is, in this case, labelled C. Okay. Moving down, transmission from P to T is by messages, which are electrical, chemical, both chemical and electrical, or controlled by the nervous and endocrine systems. Well, I think we can straight away cross out this one, because it doesn't really make sense, so we'll just cross that one out straight away. And then you've got electrical, chemical, or both electrical and chemical. Well, it would be electrical if it was just one nerve. Okay, so if this is just one nerve, then yep, that is electrical down there. But because it's from one nerve, it's then connecting to another nerve, and there is a gap here. And that gap, remember, is called the synapse. And if you remember at your synapse, you have, when the chemical impulse comes down, it causes neurotransmitter to diffuse across the synaptic cleft, which then diffuses across and then causes the next neuron to start its impulse. Okay, so because that is happening, that diffusion here is chemical in nature. So because we're going through the whole of the reflex arc, not just one neuron, it has to be both electrical and chemical. Alrighty, moving down. Question 13. The adrenal glands release adrenaline. An example of the effect of adrenaline is the dilation of the pupils of the eye, especially during times of fear. Adrenaline released from the adrenal glands would A, reach target cells by diffusion. Well, no, I think we can safely rule that one out. React with each cell it comes into contact with. Again, we know that that doesn't happen. Circulate around the whole body in the circulatory system. We know that hormones do that, so it could be that. And travel directly to target cells. Well, again, we know that hormones don't do that. They go around the entire body, which means that it has to be C. So our key thing here is that we know that hormones travel in the blood. They go in the circulatory system. So it has to go around, it has to go in the circulatory system. It doesn't just reach the cell automatically. Alright, moving on. So with respect to nerve cells, the following is true. Motor neurons carry messages to the central nervous system. No. So remember our some random smiles make everything right. Stimulus, stimulus receptor, sensory neuron. Oh, I forgot one there. That was silly of me. So let's try that again. Some random smiles can make everything right. That's clearly a C. So if we go again, so we've got stimulus receptor, sensory neuron, central nervous system, motor neuron, effector, response. So going back onto our sensory neurons carry information from sense organs to the sense organs to the central nervous system. Well, let's have a look up here. So our sense organs, are the receptor, and our central nervous system is here. And so in the middle, yes, we do have our sensory neuron. Okay, so that is actually the correct one for this one. We'll just double check. Nerve impulses travel more slowly along axons with a myelin sheath. Well, that's incorrect. We know that that's incorrect. And D, interneurons carry impulses from motor neurons to sensory neurons. Again, the interneurons, remember, so if we've got a sensory neuron, oh, sorry, that's rubbish, terrible diagramming, try that again. We've got a sensory neuron here. Remember, the interneuron is in the central nervous system, and then connects it to the motor neuron. That's again a rubbish diagram. Come on, what am I doing? All over the place. There we go, that's better-ish. Okay, so this central nervous system is made up of these relay neurons. So the impulse only ever goes this way. So relay neurons or interneurons carry impulses from motor neurons to sensory neurons. That is incorrect, okay? Because that is suggesting that the impulse would travel that direction, which is not true. The impulse only ever goes that way. It only goes from the sensory neuron to the central nervous system to the motor neuron. So again, we can cross that one out straight away. Okay, go into cold climates. Animals can increase heat production by restricting blood flow to the body's extremities, raising body hairs to trap heat, drinking warm fluids, and increasing the rate of shivering. Alright, your key thing here is this phrase, increase heat production. Okay, so yes, this one, in a cold environment, this would happen. Okay, but is that actually increasing heat production? Okay, it's not here. What it's actually doing is reducing heat loss. Okay, so yes, it's helping keep it warm, and yes, it is an adaptation that we'd see in a cold environment. However, it's not increasing the heat production, so that one is incorrect. Raising body hairs to trap heat. Again, yes, that's something that happens, but it is reducing heat loss. It is not increasing heat production, so we can cross that one out as well. Drinking warm fluids, well, yes, but an animal wouldn't really do that for a start. And again, it's not increasing heat production, which means that it must be D, increasing the rate of shivering. And again, this makes sense because we know that shivering makes heat. Okay, so remember, shivering is the rapid contraction of the muscles. Okay, so if you've got loads of muscle cells, these are our muscle cells, aren't they lovely? Doop-a-doop-a-doo, there's the nucleus, la la la. Okay, remember, shivering is rapidly contracting and relaxing those muscle cells. I'm going to actually draw one that looks a little bit more like a muscle cell. There you go. So massively producing heat energy just by contracting and relaxing those muscle cells. So our answer is D for that one. All right, and lastly, one of the roles of the kidneys is to regulate water content. With respect to this role, the hormone ADH causes more water to be excreted in the urine. Drinking large amounts of water decreases the amount of ADH secreted into the blood. Increasing salt uptake causes an increased water loss in urine. And D, high level of salt in the blood causes a reduction amount of ADH released into the blood. Okay, so here you've got to think, all right, well, when is ADH released into the blood? Okay, so remember, ADH is released when you are thirsty. Okay, it is part of the thirst response. So ADH would be released into your blood if you have not got enough water levels. Okay, so low water causes ADH to be released, and that again causes the increased rate of reabsorption in the kidneys, and so more water going back into the blood and less urine. Okay, so let's have a look. The hormone ADH causes more water to be excreted in the urine. That is incorrect. ADH causes more water to get reabsorbed. Drinking large amounts of water decreases the amount of ADH. Well, yes, that's true, because if you have large amounts of water, you're not going to be thirsty, you're not going to have your ADH released, because you want to try and get rid of that water. You don't want to keep it in the blood. Increasing salt uptake causes an increased water loss in urine. Well, if we've got increased salt, then we're going to have less water in the blood. So if we've got less water in the blood, we want to keep some of that water. We don't want to get lost in the urine, so that is incorrect. And finally, the high level of salt in the blood causes a reduction in the amount of ADH released into the blood. Again, high level of salt, well, that would make us be thirsty. Think about after you've had your hot chips, you're always thirsty after that. So that would actually cause ADH to get released. So again, it can't be D. All right, so it has to be B for that one.